You're listening to the Fezcast, produced on behalf of the Saracen Supporters Association and featuring the independent thoughts, rants and rambles of Saracens fans and special guests. If you'd like your opinion to be heard on the show, you can find the Fezcast on Facebook or Fezcast_SSA on Instagram and whatever Twitter is known as these days. But for now, enjoy this week's show.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to our next edition of the Fezcast. It's going to be a slightly different one because we're not going to do too much talking about the rugby on the weekend because there wasn't really a great deal of rugby. And Duncan, despite being at Twickenham yesterday, you don't think there was much rugby either, was there? Really, it was more competitive Guinness drinking, wasn't it?
A big shout out to a local building firm in Mill Hill called O'Shea's. I was subjected to the most heinous generosity by being fed countless pints of Guinness before the game at a pub in Hounslow and then countless pints of Guinness during the game. But, I mean, everybody will know my judgment. It's pretty worthless at the best of times, so it was really off yesterday. But it seemed like a decent performance by England to me. They were just beaten by the better side.
What you want to see is you wanted to see a reaction to the previous week in particular, and I think we did see that, didn't we? I've still got some concerns, the whole idea that Jamie George does 60 minutes and comes off. Don't understand that idea of coaching, that prescriptive, almost substitutions by number. Your hooker's done 60 minutes. If he's playing well, and Jamie was, cut the line outs otherwise, you leave him on. And if it means he stays on for 75 minutes, he stays on for 75 minutes, or he stays on for 8 minutes. We know Jamie George can do it. And it's the same in any position. I think Marcus Smith did great in attack, crossed the entire side. Defence is still an issue. The first try the South African scrum half scored was an absolute catalogue of errors in defence, wasn't it, Duncan?
Well, the two charge downs weren't pretty, were they? Fantastic step for one of the South African tries, I remember, through the haze. It seems to be a law of rugby that you change both the hooker and the scrum half, doesn't it?
Don't understand it, don't like it, don't agree with it. Quickly, though, the important thing is what happens next week, and I think we can quickly say, we got Japan next week, last one. We want to see the likes of Alex Nazoski and Elliot Daly playing, and other players who were fringe players. Finn Smith, for argument's sake. Borthwick knows what Maro Itoje does, what Jamie George does, what Henry Slade as a senior player does. You've had all these players in the squad, now use them is my prime move on this one, Duncan.
If you're going to change Jamie George, I don't think Cowan Dickey is the answer. I think Theo Dan should be on, but yeah, we should have a look at some different players next week, no doubt about it.
Absolutely. Well, that was the rugby from the weekend done. So let's move into the main bones of this one, because as I say, there was a lot of rugby, but you've done an interview with David Strettle, haven't you? And it's a fantastic interview. Just tell us a little bit about how it came about, and then we'll go in and play the interview off, because I think it's an absolutely brilliant chat you had with him.
I think I first tried trying to track David Strettle down in 2023. Did a usual internet search, found out he's working for a house building company, I thought in the Northwest, and we'll find out that that's not true, and had an email back and forth for him for almost best part of a year. And I said last week, it seems to be a trait of all of the wingers that they thoroughly enjoy it when they get down to it, but boy, they wriggle to get pinned down. But lovely fella, and I really enjoyed it.
I know that because I've been trying to pin Jack Berger down for the best part of 5 years, and but there we go. Well, look, let's play the interview in, Duncan, and then we'll have a chat afterwards just to wrap up everything and work out what's happening in the next week as well.
Righto.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
So it's a great pleasure and an honour to welcome another Saracens great to talk to us. David Strettle, welcome to the Fezcast.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for doing it. So you're a northern lad, and I see you're on the books of Liverpool and Manchester City, and also played rugby league as a boy. How did you get into Union?
So I went to a state school, but we were surrounded by quite a lot of private schools. So the only way we could get a fixture list was by playing Union. So at the age of 11, I shifted codes and went from league to Union.
Wow, that sounds like a chance in 100 that would happen.
Yeah.
Given where you were brought up, where you were living.
You'd be surprised. There's quite a lot of rugby union around there. You've got Altrincham Kersal, which is the club next to us, which Mark Crato came from. Got Lynn Rugby Club, where I went to, and they're National 2 for a village as well. So they're doing phenomenal. So there is a little bit of rugby union around there, but as you say, it is predominantly League and the Wire and Wigan and St Helens. So yeah, it's more known as obviously the hotbed of Rugby League.
Yeah. Now, just one of the brilliant tries that you scored was that when in the final against Bath, someone gave you a terrible pass.
Super dunk.
That was headed for your feet. But
Duncan Taylor. No, it was an offload. It's quite a good little giggle.
Well, anyway, you flicked it up with your foot, caught it and scored. So I guess it was that football training that came in handy there.
Yeah, no, it was. It's one of those moments. I mean, a lot of lads muck around in training and flick the balls up and stuff, and you don't really think about the time. You just see the ball, it isn't hit the floor yet, and there's a chance of flicking it. And we went on to score from it. So yeah, I remember Sean Long doing something like that in Rugby League as well. And obviously it looks great when it comes off, but if it doesn't, you look a bit.
Well, I went into work the Monday after, and I tell you, a few people came up to me and said, "Were you at the game where David Strettle did that?" So it was a landmark for you, I think.
No, definitely. It's always good to pull off a skill like that. But yeah, doing it at a final was pretty special.
Oh yeah. So how did you end up being a professional at Rotherham?
University. I went to Sheffield Hallam University, other side of the Pennines, so over in Yorkshire. It's quite interesting. A lot of people always say to you when you play sport for a living, like, oh, when do you decide you want to be a professional? And you never really do. It's just someone eventually starts paying you to do it. And I was at University at Sheffield, and Rotherham were in Division 1 at the time. I mean, which would be like the new championship. And Dean Richards was the Harlequins coach. Harlequins got relegated to the Division 1. And saw me playing, and Dean actually he approached me in the shower.
As you do.
He
was obviously keen.
Yeah, so it was interesting because we'd finished the game, played against Quins. I actually hadn't probably done that much in the game, to be honest with you. It was a bit of anyone who's been to Clifton Lane up at Rotherham, when it's a wintry day, it's not the easiest place to play running rugby. And it turns out that Mike Schmidt, who I owe a lot to because he put a good word in for me, he had been my player coach at Rotherham. And then he moved down and was coaching Esher. And Esher were were affiliated to Quins, should I say. And every time they're going to play against a team Harlequins, they would obviously speak to Schmitty, and he'd give him a bit of background on them. And Schmitty basically said, look, there's a young lad who plays at Rotherham who I think you should have a proper look at and should possibly sign. And off the back of that, Dino, yeah, like I said, and this probably makes me look a bit daft now, but being from Rugby League country and being a football fan, I didn't follow Union, even though we had Sale on our doorstep. I think I only ever went to watch one Sale game. And this gentleman, who turns out to be Dean Richards, approached me in the shower and basically says, look, if we get promoted, would you be keen to sign for us? And Quins had won every game so far that season, so it's pretty much a dead cert they would. And so I come out of the shower, get changed, pop into the clubhouse, and my dad's there who's watched the game. And he said, oh, what's taking you so long? And I said, oh, I've been chatting to someone. They've asked me to sign for Quins. He said, well, who spoke to you? I said, oh, that gentleman there. And my dad was embarrassed. I went, what, Dean Richards? Because my dad obviously knew who he was.
Yeah,
that's how it came about. So I'd already finished uni that year. And then moved to the big smoke.
Yeah. So October 2006, you made your debut, and you were in the England team by February 2007. So do you remember anything about that?
Yeah, it was hit the ground with a bump, basically. It was. I've always said to people, you don't know how good you are until you judge yourself against, obviously, other players. And I was obviously playing well in Division 1. I was scoring lots of tries. I think Rotherham were top of the league at one point throughout the years and when I was playing for them. And obviously you think, I'm obviously a good player, but you've never played against professionals, like top-level professionals, international players. Yeah, Dean Richards signed us, and I had my first game for Quins, like you say, it's October. And I think I scored like 9 tries in a matter of weeks. And Jason Robinson got injured. Yeah, actually, no, I got picked for the A team for England A, and we were training, and Jim Allender was the England A coach, and we were training, and I was starting on the wing against Ireland. It was going to be the Ireland A team. And after training, Jim Allender called me into his room, and because we're down in Exeter, and they said, "Oh, look, Stretz, I got some bad news. Brian Ashton has sent a few players down to our squad who's not playing this weekend." And James Simpson Daniels was one of them. So he said, "You're not going to be needed this week." And, you think it is what it is. So I get in my car, start driving actually back to Warrington from Exeter, a bit of a way. Get halfway, I get a phone call off Jim saying, Stretch, Sinbad's pulled his hamstring. Can you get back to training? So I turn around, get back to training, end up playing that game, have a stormer. And then we've then got I'm at Quins, we then have the Wednesday off, I think it is. So as I do, being a northern lad, I day off, I'm driving back up north to Warrington from Quins. And I get a phone call and take this phone call. And the lady says, hi, David, it's Vivian. And I'm thinking, who's Vivian? I've never heard of a Vivian, but you're being polite. You say, oh, hi, Vivian, And she went, Jason's injured. And again, I'm thinking, who's Jason? I don't know any Jason. Jason Leonard, obviously, but I'm not playing with him. He's a Quins legend. And I'm thinking, okay. And then suddenly she says, how soon can you get down to Bath? And it was only when she said that Danny Kerr, my flatmate at the time, was playing for England 20s, who were training down at Bath against the full England team. And it's only then when it clicked, I thought, God, this is England. So I didn't have any boots on me. So I carried on driving to Warrington to pick some boots up and then turned straight down the M5 down to Bath. Probably got down there about 10:30 in the evening, walked into the Bath Spa Hotel. Brian Ashton, who I've not met yet, he stood in the lobby, comes up, shakes my hand, he says, oh, congratulations, you're starting on the weekend.
Bloody hell. No time to get nervous about it then?
No, not at all. So I walk into the team room, Andy Farrell and Johnny Wilkinson, two icons of the game. I've still never met, at this point.
Yeah.
And they turn around, all right, Stretch, how you doing? I'm like, I'm more chuffed they know my name at this point. So, so next thing I get chatting with them and Johnny's like, well, come to the room. So I've got to go through all the plays with you. So obviously my phone starts blowing up. I'm texting people like my mum and dad saying, oh, got to get tickets or get the flight sorted to Ireland. So yeah, it's like everything that year, it just happened in the blink of an eye, to be honest with you.
What a time. I mean, you were around the England setup for a good 6 years, but it's fair to say that the breaks you got were the wrong ones. Yeah,
I think I had my first cap in 2007. And I think probably my last was 2014 or 15. And I was just unlucky. It's funny because a lot of people thought I was injury prone. And I'm actually the furthest thing from it. I can't remember many times being injured in the league. Very durable, played God knows how many games.
Yeah.
And just sod's law that when I actually played for England, just before the World Cup in 2007, 2 days before we flew, I'd just been told myself, Josh Lucy and Jason Robinson that we were the starting backs.
Yeah.
So suddenly I ring my mum and dad, tell them I'm going to the World Cup. They book all their tickets around France for the games. I go out the next day to do training. Me and Josh Lucy are just messing around doing some kicks and one-on-ones. I just felt something go in my foot. Didn't think much of it. Just thought I'd sprain my foot or something. Hobbled over to the sideline. Next thing, they take me to hospital, x-ray it, and I've fractured my fifth metatarsal. So I'm sat there thinking it's only like a small bone. Like I'm all right for a couple of weeks. And he said, no, it's the World Cup gone. That bone that was broken, I then... World Cup finished, got my place back for the next tournament, which was the Six Nations. First game of the Six Nations, I then make a break and get a foot slam onto the exact same bone and it breaks, same bone again. So, and then the third time, just for the Autumn Internationals, it goes again. So basically they found out that when they operated, the bone hadn't healed. So they ended up putting a screw through it. So I had three breaks with the country, which weren't the breaks. But you know what? I've seen unbelievable players never get a cap. You just think you feel so lucky still when you look back to have been able to do it. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to obviously get a few more caps and played the games that I was probably been selected for. But like I said, there's been so many players who never had that luxury of playing on that England shirt.
And it's not as if you didn't have a great career. But it did seem, it seems you got better and better throughout your career. And then later on, you weren't in contention.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, it's an opinion at the end of the day. If you said to a director of rugby, pick your starting England team, they'd all be different. And you kind of accept that sometimes you're being favoured, sometimes you won't. Ironically, I personally think when I was playing my best rugby, I wasn't getting picked.
I agree.
Yeah. And when I actually went over to Claremont, I'd never spoken to Eddie Jones. Our paths hadn't crossed. He was Saracens coach the year before I joined. And I got a phone call out of the blue from Eddie. I was playing well over in Claremont, considering that the communication hadn't been the best from England coaches prior to Eddie sometimes. Actually, to get a phone call off Eddie when I wasn't expecting it, basically saying, look, if you're based in England, you'd be starting. And he just said, the way I interpret the foreign players rule is you've got to be head and shoulders above someone else in your position. And he said, look, I think you're playing the best, but I don't think you're head and shoulders above other players in your position at the moment. And I just was honest with him. I said, look, be honest with you, I never ever expected this phone call, so thanks for it. And for me, it was quite a nice kind of closing of that chapter in my career.
Yeah.
Or the fact that even though I've decided to not play for England and go to Claremont, the fact I then get the call to the England coach telling me that we will still be picking you, it was a nice way to personally to bow out for me.
I bet Zach Mercer would tell you did the right decision not to come back to England on the basis of that call.
Yeah, no, it's tough, isn't it? I mean, you see some lads and I don't want to say they get messed around. It must be very difficult for coaches trying to, appease players and give players, opportunities when players are good and they're not technically in form. I mean, you hear credit in the bank's been thrown around a lot. And I mean, I personally think that if you're the best in the country at the time, you should play for your country. But then you put an England coach in, it's a 4-year cycle. I remember Sean Perry randomly was playing amazing and it was just after the World Cup. And they dropped him because they thought, well, he's not going to be around for the next World Cup. And you thought, well, this lad's the best in the country at the moment, and he's not getting picked. So I think, I think England sometimes turns into a club in itself, which is on, like I said, 4-year cycle. So once you're in there, it's good. But if you're on the fringes, especially with the elite player squad now, because that wasn't around when I first came on the scene. If there'd been an EPS squad, I would never have got my first cap like I did.
Yeah.
So there's definitely pros and cons to it.
It's a difficult one, this French question. When you see Jack Willis really tearing it up for Toulouse, you think, it'd be great to see him playing for England. But then Maro Itoje has said the only reason he's really still with Saracens is to play with England. So I'm sure you'd see a bit of an exodus of quality from the Premiership if that rule was changed. Yeah,
I think you would. But at the same time, I think it's one of those things where you are kind of limited as well. It's good for Maro because Maro's first choice and stuff like this. But it's interesting. I was actually approached by a good few law firms because it wasn't actually legal what they were doing.
Yeah.
Because it's European employment law. If someone in a position like Owen Farrell wants to renew his contract, there's only a finite amount of clubs he's going to go to. There's only a finite amount of clubs who want to actually sign at that point. So suddenly you've got your French clubs options, then it does open the opportunities and your negotiating powers. So it's interesting in rugby. I've always said that the people who are negotiating are often the England players, and the England players have got it the best. They're not the ones who are a little bit further down and don't have the option of, saying, well, I can stay here and get decent salary off Saracens and get my England money. It's the other guys who possibly do want the opportunity for. I mean, Nick Benden's a great example. Stefan Armitage. There's so many you can go through who had to make that decision and think, well, no, I'm going to go over to France and basically have to turn my back on England.
The French have tightened it up a bit since something you have to have so many people come through the French academy system.
The GIFs, the Jeux International Français, they're and that's a clever way of doing it because it's nothing to do with being French. It's how long you played in the academy. I remember Scott Spedding, who played at Claremont with us. He the rule wasn't in place when he was in the academy, and he got offered a first team contract after a year of being in the academy. So he signed for the first team as you would, but the rule is you've got to have been in the academy for 2 years. So despite him playing for France numerous occasions, living in France since he was 17, 18, fluent French speaker, kids are French, he wasn't able to play for France. But it was their way of getting around the, whether it was the European employment laws or things like that. And, you can definitely see that, I think it's strengthened the French squad, but it's strengthened the French squad in the sense that it's increased the player base coming into like the investment in these players from a young age, and they're sticking with these young lads now.
Yeah, means a lot of Fijians in their academies, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Well, there can actually, I could be wrong saying this, but I don't know. I do believe that you can have an affiliating academy over in Fiji or Samoa for a year, and that counts as one of the. I mean, I don't know. I could have just heard that on the grapevine, but yeah, no. There's a lot of Frenchies like Basiliata, Raka, people I played with who I wouldn't technically class them as French.
So 4 years at Quins, and then. As Quins fans would have it, you moved to the dark side.
Yeah, well...
across London. How did that come about?
I mean, look, it's nice. I've retired 5 years, can be honest. I went into Mark Evans and basically I didn't have an agent at the time. It was time to negotiate my contract, so I was up. And he basically said to me, he says, oh, this is what we think your market value is. I mean, I'm a northern lad. I can talk for myself because I can stand up for myself. And I said, well... And it was less than I knew I was worth. And I said to Mark, look, Mark, I said... the only way you can judge your market value is by putting yourself on the market. And I said, I don't want to do that. I said, but that's you basically, I've come to speak to you in person. I've not got an agent involved. And he basically said, oh, no, that's what we think you're worth kind of thing. So I said, okay. So I said, well, you've got to give me your best offer now because I'm not coming back to negotiate. So I went away, came back 2 weeks later with 3 offers from 3 different Premiership clubs, all double what he was offering, some longer contract lengths. And I said, that's my market value, Mark. And I put it on the table and he just went, oh, well, we can't match but we can actually do a bit. I said, you had your chance, buddy. And I left. And I just, because it made me feel like I wasn't valued. I suddenly thought like, I've been here 4 years, loved the club, didn't want to leave. But then you can start feeling like someone's trying to take advantage of it. I mean, I won't name names, but there were other players who have gone on to become like Harlequins, legends and stuff who were trying to leave as well and had actually looked to get to other clubs under the way that the contracts were being done that time. They kind of fell through with other clubs, so they end up staying. But yeah, I think if it wasn't for, what happened at other clubs, Quins could have lost quite a few players that year.
Well, I'm a big fan of Mark Evans, but I'm really pleased that he was an idiot in that instance.
Well, look, I understand. He's in a situation where, they've got to obviously save money. You've got to try and got a salary cap and things like that. But, that's a club problem, not a me problem. Everyone's got to go into it like that. And don't get me wrong, if it was over small amounts of money, then possibly you can be, but it was such a disparity between the two. And to be honest, the way it came about with Saracens was Andy Farrell rang me. Andy Farrell coached me at England A. We've been over and play with England A. Obviously, being a rugby league lad, Andy Farrell's very well known. He's a legend and stuff. And I actually genuinely went up to Saracens when I met with them, and I knew no one there. It was a club I didn't think I was going to, go to because, again, it's not like you can speak to someone about this, but they got to the Premiership final that year. Just got beat in the last kick of the game, if you remember, by Leicester off the kickoff. Mudos scored up.
Yeah.
It was one of those where I actually went up, and I've got to say, I got just a really nice feel for the place. Yeah, it was a big decision because you're moving to a club where you don't know anybody. But yeah, I always think decisions are sometimes people put too much of a onus on them. It's actually what you make of it when you've done it. So I knew if I bought into Saracens and tried my hardest, that good things would hopefully happen.
I've spoken to a few players now and they all say the same thing. It's just going to the place and also speaking to people around. They just feel it's right.
It was Brendan Venter and Edward Griffiths who was more in charge when I signed, and they were brilliant. I mean, I've always said, I know these guys don't mind me saying this, but Brendan and Edward are people you want to get in charge when things need to change. When ships need righting, it's something. I mean, again, I wasn't a Saracens player through those periods, but Saracens, before I joined, always felt like a bit of a mid-table club. Had so much promise, never achieved it. Had some brilliant players. That's what obviously wanted to be changed. And Edward and Brendan were brilliant at doing that, because they're very strong characters. You speak to Brendan before kickoff, you'll run through a brick wall for him. But then with Mark's to my eyes, complete opposite. He's very relaxed. He's someone who, you feel that, there's a long-term plan. You can see the longevity with him. And I think what's happened at Saracens with the transition from the coaches and how I think that's to me is what's been amazing at the club. It's just worked perfect.
And no more than this season, there's been so much change. And, I think everybody's just praying that he stays, that he's motivated to stay, because he's just got that ability to lose coaching staff, bring other people through, and this season changed the team. And look at the start we've made.
Yeah, I think Saracens are a great example. It's not the people that make it, ironically, is that creates the culture. But when you're new to the culture, I mean, when you look at Jamie George and Owen and like, I think it was like 5 lads who went through the academy and played Lions together. So it's not through chance it shows you that the culture is creating these people. And what they've done so well is they've created and maintained that culture. And when you drop into it, I mean, I thought when I was playing at Harlequins, I thought I knew everything. You called the Spice Boys, at Quins, we just loved it. We'd go and play flair rugby and yeah, we'd finish mid-table. And you go to Saracens, you suddenly see actually, there's more depth, there's more layers to this. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, we played too methodical at times, and it was trying to get that balance. And when I think it was a couple of years ago, Saracens made a massive point of trying to play more rugby. And you could see that's where it comes from. But it's all based on those strong foundations of knowing. I mean, we were sometimes 2-3 tries down in the game. We didn't change our game plan. We just did the same thing, did it, and we ended up winning the games where other teams I played for, you suddenly start thinking, we've got to change what we do. give Saracens credit. They're so good at doing the basics, which is what finals usually won by. It was ingrained to all the players.
So memory plays a funny trick, and I remember you always herring down the wing and scoring in the corner. But going over your YouTube reels recently, you scored some crackers weaving through traffic.
Yeah, I mean, that's give Quins credit, for a back three player, when a team's trying to run around a bit and spread the ball, sometimes other teams get caught up in that and it can create a lot of space. And that was my game. My game was be fleet of foot, be agile, but also, I always say, you're not a striker in football. You've got to do two jobs. You've got to defend and you've got to be a good attacker. And I always went into games just as much focus on defense because I knew that was just as important. But yeah, for me, I wanted to get my hands on the ball. I wanted to get my hands on the ball, ideally in space, but you kind of realize that, when you're playing in these, especially with Saracens where we had such a structure, you could be on the 4th phase or 44th phase. You're pretty much in the same structure. You very rarely get the opportunities to do that. So it was a case of, obviously a lot of times finishing tries on the wing, which, I thankfully did.
And in the middle, under the post, so seen enough.
Yeah, no, and this is, I was lucky, I was fast and I could step off both feet. And yeah, it's one of those things where you're playing in a good team, you get more opportunities. And sevens, I played England sevens, and that I always say any player who's going to be a 15s player on the wing or back three, you've got to give him a year playing sevens for England, because it's the skills you learn, the defense things. It's phenomenal for learning. At the end of the day, you're professional. You've got to learn the skill base. That is phenomenal.
There's been a few Saracens wingers, Chris Wiles, Richard Horton, have gone that way, haven't they?
Yeah, I'd say Wilesy and me are slightly different. He's I speak to Wilesy regularly. He was definitely more what I'd class as a physical winger. And that's why he was such a good centre as well. But yeah, no, we played sevens against each other. Very good sevens player.
So you had 2 Prem titles with Saracens in 10 years, and then the lure of a new lifestyle, a new country, a new challenge at Claremont. So it's a great working class town with its tyre factories and everything. And I really want to go. I've never been there, but the atmosphere looks incredible.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Phenomenal. When we won the top 14 in 2017, I think it was 2017, we came back to the Jord in Claremont and there were 50, 60,000 people waiting for us. I could have walked outside Allianz Park with the European Cup trophy and knocked on someone's door. They wouldn't have a clue. That's the difference between France and England. It's the lifeblood of the town. It's somewhere, if you win, everyone loves you. If you lose, don't go out. Yeah, it's phenomenal. And again, it was, when it came about, I actually had 3 more years on my contract at Saracens when Claremont contacted me. And they contacted me 11th hour. I didn't want to leave Saracens. I wasn't looking to leave or anything like that. But then I was 32 and the opportunity came along. First thing I did was ring Mark McCall and rang Smalley. And I was honest with him. I said, look, I've been offered this opportunity. Obviously, I'm contracted to Saracens. You say I can't go, I can't go. That's what's so good about Saracens. Saracens will never stand in anybody's way. And he appreciated I've been obviously in the league a long time, been a servant of Saracens. And ironically, I went over to Claremont, flew over there with my wife, Phoebe, and they did the big sell. Took us to lovely restaurants, showed us the club, showed us the training ground. And weather, again, it's the northern in me, up suddenly puts like your walls up, your defence up a little bit. I thought, and like I said, I was so happy at Saracens. It was only I'd arranged to meet Nick Abendon and his wife after all the, been shown around. And we sat in the main Jord, beautiful sunny day. I just got a really different vibe, obviously a different way of life, a different experience, different country. And I didn't say anything to my wife at the time, but we got back on the flight. Phoebe turned around to me and said, what did you think? And I didn't know whether to ask her first. And we kind of both, I knew what she was thinking. I said, I think we should do it. So I rang Smalley straight up and told him, because he said, look, if you do decide, let me know straight away. And I did. And yeah, I've got to say, I felt so lucky. It was an unbelievable experience to be able to do. I'd encourage anyone who's got the opportunity to go and live in a foreign country. I had my 2 oldest kids were born in France. We still got great friends over there. Brilliant experience. You work in life to obviously earn money, but to enjoy it and to have experiences. And I appreciate that a lot of people become tribal with sport and think, oh, why is he going there? Why is he doing that? But to look back, I think to be able to have done what I've done in the Premiership and have that 3-year period experience in the top 14.
That's fantastic of Mark McCall, isn't it? Because you were so bloody good at that time.
And this is it, yeah.
And you weren't easy to replace.
Yeah, and I've got to say, like I said, I wasn't wanting to leave. It wasn't like I wasn't happy. But I was old enough to realise that, I mean, I was 32, and most times the big French clubs come in for you when you're 27, 28 off the back of a World Cup. But I'd actually played against Claremont 4 or 5 times in the last 2 or 3 years and always scored against them, scored a couple of tries, and always had good game against them. So I think I've been on their radar. So yeah, look, I always think all you can do is be honest, and I was honest with Smalley, and I'd like to think that's why I ended up then getting a phone call, Smalley's come back, which again, I couldn't have written, worked out perfect.
So as you say, you won a top 14 title, which is brilliant. But then you lost the European final to a certain team from North London.
Yeah, to Sarries. Yeah, but do you know what? It was one of those where we played very well throughout the European Cup, and we had a great game against Leinster in the semis. But it's, yeah, having been on the receiving end of the Saracens, the wall and the kicking strategy and things like that, you realise why we were such a difficult team to play against. And I've got no qualms with beaten by the better side on the day. If anything, I'd rather have been beaten by Saracens because I had so many mates there. I actually had to come off the French group, the WhatsApp group, like the week before, then getting beat by, say, a Leicester or Northampton in the final. Yeah, it's very tough playing against your friends because at the end of the day, there can only be one winner. But like I said, the fact that we then went on and won the top 14, I might be a bit more bitter if we'd have lost both. Yeah, it was a day that, we weren't destined to win. But I think that gave us that extra impetus to go on to the top 14 and win that.
Yeah, absolutely. Claremont got a bit of revenge later on in the year on a terrible snowbound night in London.
Was it Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday? Oh, God.
I've obliterated all memory of that. I can't even remember if you were playing, David.
I don't think anyone was playing apart from Rack.
Oh, he was incredible.
Yeah. And I didn't tell the Saracens lads about him beforehand. They picked him a bit. I remember the Claremont team manager, he called me into his office, say on the week before the game or a couple of weeks before. And he said, we're looking at hotels to stay when we go over and play Claremont. Is there any you can recommend? We've seen the Hilton in Watford. Is that any good? And I said, you want to go to Luton Hoo? That's quite a nice place. So he said, okay, no worries. So we actually booked the Luton Hoo, which obviously is much nicer. We got there and obviously snow was forecast. So we're due to play on the Saturday, I think.
Yeah.
It was cancelled. But the thing is, I was getting texts off the Saracens boys saying the game's cancelled because my cousin still works actually at Saracens. He said, the game's cancelled. And I'm in a team meeting prepping for the game. And I'm thinking, the game's off. They don't know this. So after the meeting, I was like, guys, look, it's been called off kind of stuff. So it's due to play Sunday. Didn't get played Sunday because you couldn't get into the stadium. I think the pitch was okay, but people couldn't get into the stadium.
It was the roads.
Yeah.
The roads were just sort of feet high in snow.
Yeah, and then Monday, finally the game happened. What is really ironic is, and my coach that's kind of probably hate me saying this, but it's true. All week we practiced a kicking game. And I kept on saying to him, don't kick against Saracens. Everyone does this. They think, we'll be attritional. Saracens kick, we'll kick better. And like Saracens have done this for so long, they know every single in and out of why the kicking game works. So it's not just about the kick chase or this or that. It's about, anyway, sure enough, we went in the game. All we practiced was kicking. When we went into the game and the weather, first half, again, you might not remember, it was blowing a gale like a blizzard against us. So all we could do was run. And Raka just ripped everyone to pieces. I think we scored 3 tries in the first 20 minutes. So ironically, despite training doing one thing, the elements meant we did something else. And yeah, I couldn't believe it because I'm sat there with a bunch of French lads and we all know the French. The highs are high and the lows are low. Thought they've been sat around this hotel for 2 days. They're not interested in the slightest. You've got Saracens who are one of the most professional teams going. I'm like, this isn't going to be good. And it was a complete opposite.
It was carnage. I've only ever once taken a bottle of rum to a game because I knew it was going to be cold for 2 reasons. A, it obliterated the memory, but it was carnage. It really was. So 2018, back at Saracens for a final year and double champions. You had another great season in both finals. What a way to bow out.
Yeah, no, again, couldn't have written it. Because of the GIF rule, the what we spoke about earlier, the Claremont weren't able to retain as many of the senior players. They were investing their money in the GIF qualified youngsters. That made me think, well, do I retire? Do I stay in France? Because again, all the clubs are having this issue in France. And having been lucky enough to play at Saracens, who were the dominant team in England, you don't really want to go and play for, I don't want to say a lesser team, but a team where you're not going to be competing for trophies and things. So I genuinely have only been starting to think for about 2 or 3 weeks, what am I going to do? Am I going to go and make a decision to go and play at, say, Biarritz or Bayonne, somewhere like that, which is more, obviously you're still going to try harder to rugby, but there is a lifestyle element to it. It was just before Christmas, the phone rang and I could see Mark McCall on it. And as soon as I saw his name, I thought, I'm going back to Saracens. And literally, phone call was probably about a minute long. And he just said to me, he says, "Are you out of contract next year?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you want to come back?" And I said, "Yeah." It wasn't even, we didn't even discuss figures or anything like that. It was a case of, he knew I was buying into it. And like you say, we had a phenomenal season, did a double. Yeah, I was 36. I turned 36 and I just was like, there's no better time. There's never going to be a good time to bow out of playing professional sport. It's always going to be difficult. But I just thought, you're never going to have a better opportunity to go out on a high. And actually, when I look back now, I left and COVID hit. And, obviously the salary cap situation, everything, it was just a torrid time to be involved in rugby at any level, So again, just through sheer dumb luck, I actually managed to bow at exactly the right time.
Absolutely. I think it was at an SSA evening or something. I saw you interviewed live and you said that you thought the top 14 was less attritional than the Premiership, which I think I asked you about it at the time. I still don't understand it because, there's some big lads in the top 14.
There are some big lads, but big lads get tired.
Yeah.
And because they're not as structured, I mean, take it with a pinch of salt. I'm coming from Saracens at the time, which was very, very structured. And going to a team like Claremont, who's renowned for like Jouet playing around a lot. And even when you put structure in place at a French team, most of the lads I was talking to, or even when you watch other teams, there's like a 3-phase, 4-phase play, and then we'll see what happens. Whereas it wasn't like that and now it's not like that as much, obviously, in rugby as a whole. And the difference is in France, the main difference is top 6 teams get into the playoffs.
Yeah.
Where it's only top 4 in England. So you've got that bit of leeway that if you've got a couple more months or a couple more weeks before the end of the season where it's not like we're never going to get to the top 4 now. So I think that was more my point. I remember being told Vern Cotter was coach of Claremont the year before I joined, or 2 years before I joined. And he basically said to us, because Claremont had that phenomenal home record, 76 games unbeaten. It was self-perpetuating because basically teams would be like, we're not going to send our decent team there because they're going to get beat. So they'd send their espoir, send all their youngsters. And Claremont would put the bad, like the real strongest team out, batter them. And then my first game for Claremont was La Rochelle away, and we beat La Rochelle. I was in the training room. My record at Saracens, or our record at Saracens, was just as good away from home than it was at home. Sometimes it was actually better. So it shows the level of importance, both home and away. It was the celebrations after this La Rochelle game. And I said to John O'Gibbs, who was one of our coaches, like, mate, this is unbelievable. He went, yeah, we never win away. And it was just, and they worked off the basis under Vern Cotter, and that mindset was still there. If you win all your home games and 2 on 2 away, you qualify in the top 6. I personally think that's the complete worst mentality you can have because all your fundamentals are being changed week in, week out. You should treat every game with the same level of respect, but that's the French.
That's really interesting because I watch a bit of top 14 at Perpignan, and I thought it was all down to the atmosphere. That thing you talked about, you better not lose at home or you won't make it out of the stadium. But
yeah, no, it's all rolls into it. But again, I was quite amazed at how, because you've got big squads over there. I mean, I remember training and you had two back lines, the back line that was picked and the back line that wasn't picked, and they changed massively every week. And they'd both be full internationals, like world beaters. You'd be thinking like the level of talent these guys have got at the dispersal. It was one of those things where they had to as well. Anyone who follows football now could see Chelsea over the years. They bought so many good players. You've got to keep these players happy, so they've got to be rotated in and out.
Yeah.
And you definitely see a big change in the team sheet every week, and which is why they'd really then try and focus on making sure the home games were, the definitely the strongest players.
So at the end of your career, I saw a great interview in French with Nick Abendon translating for you. You're obviously well regarded at Claremont. It's a Claremont produced video, but when you went out shopping, did your wife speak better French?
No, I can get by with French. I wouldn't say I'm the best French speaker, especially with a Northern accent. Because when Nick went over there, it's a funny actually story, Nick. So Nick did French at school, but got told by Bath he was going to be let go probably about 6-7 months before he did. He then ended up getting a contract offer to him at Claremont. So he knew he was going to France, and Nick's a brilliant French speaker. I obviously found out 11th hour. I think I was probably 6 weeks or 8 weeks away when I got signed to actually, moving over there. So, and I did German at school. So I was literally a complete beginner. And you pick it up, you get by. The tough thing is everyone at the club speaks English. There's more English speakers than French speakers because you've got the Saffers, you've got the Kiwis, you've got Fijians. And then the French have got a far better grasp of English than the English do of French. So when you speak to Rougerie and Wesley and people like this and Morgan, they're all brilliant English speakers. So everyone just speaks in English. So you kind of actually, you're probably best off just, going socializing with some locals. But yeah, I know what you're going to say with regards to the interview, like giving him tough things to say. But that turned into just being the way I'd have a laugh. Every time I'd do an interview with Nick and he'd be doing the translating, I could think, it was like, I'd be like, it's a bit like chicken and the egg, what comes first. And I'd be throwing like, it's about the devil, and just testing his French.
Well, the one you gave him when you asked why you're retiring, because I'm no spring chicken.
No spring chicken. I had some fun with him. And he kept on after everyone saying, will you stop doing that?
Well, he got his own back by translating that as because I'm very, very old.
Yeah, no, but it's great. I mean, like I said, Nick is a very, very good French speaker. And yeah, you have to, what Claremont do very well is when not when you retire from there, but when you finish at the club and move on, the last game of the season, all the fans stay behind and packed house. So there's like 20,000 people there and you do a little speech, then to thank the fans, thank everyone, and you do it in French. So I remember that out of the whole thing that I had to do at my time in Claremont, that was probably the most daunting. But yeah, unbelievable experience, like I said.
A speech in French in front of nearly 30,000 people. There's no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure at all. So, I mean, whether they understood what I was saying or not, I don't know.
So you're back in the Northwest now, and
no, I'm not. Yeah, you mentioned this. I live in Kent. Yeah, I'm.
Do you?
Yeah. So my wife's a Kent girl. She, technically, I think I'm East Sussex. I'm on the border, so just outside Tunbridge Wells. So yeah, my wife's a Kent girl, and obviously we were St Albans based. My parents are Warrington Way. Her parents are down here, so we knew we'd have to move from St Albans and be nearer because we've got 3 little kids and be near a bit of a network and a bit of help. And so my wife won, so I'm down here.
Oh, well, it's a good county, Kent. I'm from Canterbury.
Okay, yeah.
Did you have that lined up before you retired, or was it?
No, not really. I mean, I actually genuinely thought we were going to move back to France for a couple of years. But my wife works in the city, and although she'd finished for a few years whilst we were living in France, when she'd moved back, we were playing at Saracens, she'd end up being offered basically a similar role in the city. So that put the kiboshes on us moving back to France. So I then said, well, look, you need to be able to get into London. So we either stay in St Albans or, like I said, get nearer to your parents. So yes, that's why we ended up down here.
Oh, brilliant.
I still don't speak Southern.
No, you don't. It shows strength of character. It's like John Lennon always had a Scouse accent, even though he lived in New York for years. So,
well, they say that if you soften your accent, if you've got an affinity for someone, you soften your accent. And if you don't, you strengthen it. So maybe I don't like the Southern.
Don't like me then. Did you write your own Wikipedia page?
No. My mates did.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, if you go on it, and that's the worst thing. I mean, yeah, some of the stuff that my mates used to send me pictures of, that they'd written on there, like you say about Championship Manager and Lynn Rugby Club, and yeah, I've
and the man who persuaded Brendan Ventnor to bring Owen Farrell in.
Owen in, yeah. Do you know what? I kind of do remember discussing, Owen's a brilliant player. You could see at the time how in training you can see the calmness, He just doesn't get phased, and a lot of players have it. Especially, I've got to say again in Saracens, it creates that there's no blame culture. There's no, you don't worry about making mistakes. You're encouraged actually to try and express yourself. And I remember they always said there's 2 types of errors when we turned up: there's skill errors and effort errors. You make a skill error, that's the coach's fault, and it's their job to try and make you a better player. The only time they'll ever pick you up is an effort error if you're not chasing the ball or not getting back in line. And that's why they were so good when I first started there, that you had good players knowing all we've got to do is go and try our hardest. And it sounds so simple. If you look at England over the years and, they're crippled by worrying, God, if I do this, I'm not going to get picked next week. And Brendan Ventnor having his rotation policy, you knew if you're in a rotation squad, you didn't get dropped. You knew 4 or 5 weeks in advance, every game you're playing, how many minutes you were playing for. So I think that was a really important thing with regards to them picking Owen. Owen was able to show from a young age. And obviously when your dad's, he's going to help. I always wound Owen up saying every time he gets picked for England or lines, his dad's coach. So, but yeah, thankfully he can. I think he's good enough to say that that's not the only reason.
He's probably disproved that theory, hasn't he? But do you still keep an eye on Sarries?
A little bit, yeah. I because I'm obviously not as close anymore. Unfortunately don't get to go to the games. Having 3 young kids, it's ferrying them around to sport, and I think he takes priority at the moment. But yeah, I still obviously speak to a lot of the old boys on the WhatsApp groups and everything, and I just keep an eye on the results, and when they do well, you're still obviously you're really happy. So it shows there is obviously still a really emotional connection there. That when they lost that final, I was gutted and because again, they're your friends. The people that I still play with playing there. I'm not that old, so there are still a couple yet, but a few more years they'll all be gone. But it definitely has a very very close place to my heart, Saracens.
Well, you're still looking in really good shape, I've got to say, and it's been a real pleasure, David. Once again,
no, I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. So thanks a lot for doing it.
No, my pleasure.
Cheers.
This is the Fezcast.
What a great interview, as ever, Duncan. Fantastic work from you. Might take you a long while to get these wingers. What a great little chat. Fantastic to hear about the backgrounds. How Northern lads get into rugby union, first of all. It's kind of like really interesting, isn't it?
It was. I mean, he would have been a rugby league player, I'm sure. He would have been a great rugby league winger. There's no two ways about it. As with all of these long retired players, very, very open, giving us the gen on what had happened. And obviously the interviews take place on Zoom. And as I said in the interview, looking at him, he looks like he could pull on a shirt tomorrow and get out and still do the job that he did. He's in his early 40s, I think. Looks in brilliant shape.
People go one or two ways when they retire from rugby, don't they? They do what I did and piled on weight and all sorts of things and then have to lose it at a later point, or they stay fit. If you spend all day, every day training, being at peak physical conditioning, to then not have that reason to stay in that's got to be really difficult, hasn't it?
All those years of discipline and staying in shape and staying trim. And you see it at social events when players are there, we're all piling into the pints and they're being generally very disciplined about it. I think the days of big drinking rugby players after every match are long gone. So once that's over, I can imagine that there's a mental release and a freedom that for many will go down the route of piling on a few pounds.
Kevin Sinfield, England's defensive coach, will soon be doing another ultra challenge for motor neurone disease. And you got to admire that, to finding the dedication. Often that what happens, I mean, some players will, won't they? They'll go off and run marathons or all sorts of different things. Wish I'd done it a lot earlier than I did, Duncan, but there we go. Anyway, but yeah, fantastic interview, and yeah, really, really enjoyed that. And thanks to David Strettle for agreeing to do it. And any other slippery wingers out there or other positions, you know where to find us. Duncan will hunt you down and nail your feet to the floor eventually.
I've got the address of a certain player I'd like to speak to, nothing on the internet, so he'll be receiving a hand-delivered letter through his letterbox before too long.
I mean, well, it depends on which player it is. I mean, if it was someone like, Jacques Berger or something, as much as I'd like to go to Namibia, I'm not sure us standing on his doorstep would be good for our health. But I mean,
damn, you gave it away.
Holiday in Namibia, what good stuff. Hey, look, well, let's look forward to some more interviews as we go through the season, obviously, and that'd be great. Before we finish, though, Duncan, just got to bear in mind that there is rugby back this weekend, and I won't be on Fezcast duty because I will say it's our wedding anniversary, me and my wife, and we're having a bit of a party next weekend. 11 years married, 16 years together, which is something to celebrate in these days and times, obviously. But there is rugby next weekend, and it's a double header across 2 good days. Seems a bit weird why they've done that, but never mind, at Stonex. So potentially they could have done something, who knows. But yeah, it's Quins with the Prem Cup on Saturday and the Duel on Sunday for Saracens women. Looking forward to it. It'd be good to see some rugby back at Stonex. Yeah, brilliant weekend coming up. I mean, that's an interesting one, whether it should have been a double header. I had a conversation with Emily Wiles about it, and the Duel on Sunday is very much, from a marketing point of view, the whole focus of the women's season for Emily and her team. And they really want to make it, going forward, a standalone event in its own right, to build it up in the same way that the showdown is. And that was their thinking as to why not to make it a double header. For myself, I think there would have been a lot of worth in making it a double header, so that a lot of people who follow the men's game would come and watch the women as well. But I think also as well, the missed opportunity there is making it the women's game in a double header like that, bearing in mind it's the Prem Rugby Cup, the headline game, with the men supporting the women. And, we would have sent a huge message out about the importance of the women's game, that, you could have a game featuring some big names in the game, but the women taking precedence. I agree with you. I mean, I know Matt, for instance, goes more with Emily Wiles' view of things. But either way, I hope they get a big crowd on Sunday. It's going to be a great day, and I'm very much looking forward to it. I'll be nursing a hangover, which is not the best way to drive down to Stonex. So we won't be making it on Sunday. But, everybody, if you can get along, do get along. And it'd be interesting to see how well Saracens women do, given that, the last game was a defeat in Exeter. This is a big match against a very good Quins side who haven't perhaps developed in the way that other top four teams have. They've been a bit of a slider from where they've been in previous seasons, but still they've got class throughout. And, players now with an eye on the Six Nations and the World Cup next season, really putting themselves in the shop window for John Mitchell and other coaches throughout to pick them for their international sides.
That's right. I mean, the women's game used to be dominated by us and Quins, and now you've got Exeter, Bristol, Gloucester up there, and a really tight, interesting competition. So it's a must-win game for Saracens, I think, and it won't be easy. As you said, I urge anybody who hasn't been to a women's game to get down there and experience it. And you'll both enjoy it and I think be surprised at the quality of the game. Well, not surprised, hopefully, because we go on about how good they are, but you will witness how good they are.
Indeed. And what great value it is as well, because, in straightened times, that's the other thing about a double header, isn't it? You're expected to perhaps pay for 2 games, but if you've got season tickets, obviously that doesn't matter. But for the more casual person, there is a lot of expense. But the women's game is such great value for money. I mean, the tickets are a really good price. Parking as well, you can get parking for a really good price, and it's just fantastic. And you do get a slightly different crowd there, don't you? An almost even more enthusiastic crowd at the women's game, I feel.
It is very different. I mean, you still get the old stagers like us, but you get a lot of young females and you get a lot of families, and I think that's a reflection of the pricing, which is very affordable, and it is nice to see. As far as Saturday goes, it's going to be interesting to see what team turns up, how many of them we will have heard of before. I suspect as we get nearer to the resumption of the Premiership, we'll start to see more first-teamers coming in and more familiar faces.
And Quins have gone a bit more seniority heavy in this competition than perhaps Saracens have, haven't they? So also it could be interesting to see with a few youngsters who are on the verge of breaking into that team, how they go against some more experienced players, like Caleb Murphy, for instance, has played, hasn't he? And a few of those players like that. So that'll be very interesting to see how well Saracens youngsters, if that's what we are perceiving is going to happen on Saturday, how well they go against a perhaps more, we've had two championship sides, no disrespect to them, to go up against some Premiership quality will be an interesting idea of where they are as a team, won't it?
It will do. I mean, it's interesting with Saracens' approach to the Premiership Cup. It seems to be that we don't really take it seriously. We use it as a way to try trialists. As far as for the fans, I think it's a shame because we really need an interesting competition in these international windows. And I think that we're perhaps a little guilty of demeaning it for understandable reasons, because we need good games to try out players, etc. But if we can beat Quins on Saturday, then we've got a really tasty tie against Ealing at home in February, which could be a qualification decider. So I hope we win.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's hope so. Fingers crossed. But yeah, everybody, thank you very much for joining myself and Duncan on this week's Fezcast, and thank you especially to David Strettle for being nailed to the floor, as it were, by Duncan for a fantastic interview. Hope everybody enjoyed that, and we'll be back next week with. I'm not sure who'll be in the hosting seats, but it won't be me. So one of the team will be with you with our normal panel to discuss what happens in the games next weekend and the rest of the season. Looking forward to it. So yeah, great. Thank you very much, Duncan. Thank you everybody for listening in, and thank you, David Strettle.
This is the Fezcast.